It's good to see familiar faces in the audience. We are grateful to Ivy Tech for making their campus and their community center meeting space here available to us. And I especially want to thank Wes, our IT guy, who has worked diligently over the last couple of days buying new equipment and making sure we had everything we need to be set up today. I am Representative Timothy Wesco from House District 21, representing here in Elkhart County and also part of St. Joseph County. At this time, I'd like to have each of the members go around and introduce themselves. I will go ahead and pass the mic off to Representative Pryor.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm State Representative Cherish Pryor, and I represent the northwest side of Indianapolis. Thank you all for being here.
And I represent District 4 Valparaiso.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stacy Donato. I'm the State Senate for District 18. That is past Miami, Fulton counties in completion, and portions of Carroll, Kosciuszko, and Marshall counties.
I'm State Senator Eric Cook of Bedford. I serve Senate District 44, which is all a part of Lawrence, Monroe, Jackson, Brown, and Bartholomew counties in south central Indiana.
Hello, I'm Craig Snow, State Rep of District 18. I represent Kosciuszko and Waldeck County.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fadi Kadura, and I have the honor of serving Senate District 30, which covers the north side of Indy and the south side of Hamilton County. Thank you for coming today.
Good afternoon. I'm Representative Sue Arrington. I represent House District 34, which is Muncie. But I grew up about 40 minutes from here in Atwood.
Thank you, members. We've been through a busy few days, starting out in Lafayette and then going to Valparaiso and Fort Wayne this morning and here in Elkhart today. And we'll be holding a meeting in Indianapolis at the State House this coming Wednesday. The redistricting process is a once in a 10-year occasion. It's an event, which is why we're here, which is why you're here. It follows the release of the decennial U.S. Census. The Indiana General Assembly is responsible for drawing the congressional districts and the Indiana House and Senate legislative districts. The data for the census is usually released in March or April, but has been delayed due to the COVID pandemic. The U.S. Census Bureau has indicated that the data will be released on August the 12th, next week. Representative Greg Sturwald is authoring the redistricting bills. Assuming the census data comes as expected, the plan is for the General Assembly to reconvene in mid-September to debate and vote on the new districts. The legislation containing the new districts will follow the normal legislative process, which means there will be additional opportunities in both the House and Senate for public comment and input, as well as discussion amongst legislators. Members of the public will be able to draw and submit their own maps by using an online portal with mapping software at Ivy Tech campuses statewide. Assuming the data comes as planned, the online portal is expected to be launched in late August. The purpose for these meetings is for Hoosiers across the state to be able to provide input in the redistricting process. We want to establish a few guidelines for our meeting here today. Members of the public are invited to speak generally to the principles of redistricting and specifically to their preferences for the new district lines, both for state legislative districts and the congressional districts. There are sign-up forms. Many of you have already signed up, but they are available in the back of the room. If you would like to speak today, please complete one of those. And we have George Angelone with the Legislative Services Agency here today, and he has those forms. You can give those to him, or you can bring them up front here, and we will make sure that you have the opportunity to speak. If you decide that someone's already made your points and you would rather not speak today, just feel free to stay past. That is certainly welcome. For recognition to speak, let's see, members of the public giving testimony are requested to limit their comments to 5 minutes or less so that everyone has the opportunity to speak. The meeting will conclude after 2 hours. It is open for members of the commission to ask questions of those testifying regarding their testimony, but all of the questions are out of order. If you want to ask a rhetorical question, that's fine. If members want to answer questions from the audience at the concluding time, that's welcome as well. Streaming of this meeting is available at ida.in.gov/redistricting. So it will be available live stream. It will also be available following the meeting for people to go and to watch the meeting if they were unable to be here or if you want to review. So without further ado, we will begin. I would like to recognize first Julia Gauchi from Goshen. If you would come forward and speak at the podium here into the mic directly. On deck, so if you could be prepared to speak next, will be Dave Geyer from Elkhart. Welcome, Julia Gauchi from Goshen. Familiar name.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for allowing us to speak. And I would just say simply, and I think probably a lot of people will say, that it's important to redistrict so that the districts do not unfairly benefit one particular party. And so I think they should be contiguous. I think they should represent the communities. And I would encourage you to have a nonpartisan group of community people, just a community people, to look at the census data and to redraw them in the most fair way possible.
Thank you. Dave Geyer. On deck, Alan Kaufman. Dave Geyer from Elkhart. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, and thank you, representatives and senators, for being here. I am not going to speak directly about drawing districts, but I want to read some comments generally about gerrymandering, if I might. This week, a new report commissioned by the Women for Change said Indiana's General Assembly and legislative maps are now more biased towards one party than 95% of maps enacted across the United States. Dr. Chris Washaw, professor of political science at George Washington University, conducted a study on commission from Women for Change. His work focuses on party gerrymandering, and he has analyzed data from nearly all 50 states. He found that Indiana to be an extreme outlier. Dr. Kennedy, Sheila Kennedy, is a law professor at the School of Public and Environmental Affairs at IUPUI, and said both parties are guilty of gerrymandering when in position to do so. The party in charge of drawing those lines in Indiana is Republican, but in places like Maryland, it's Democratic. So this is an equal opportunity bad thing. But the party in charge draws those boundaries in ways that will favor their party and disfavor the other. In Indiana, we would still be a Republican state in terms of the legislative makeup, but we wouldn't be a supermajority, Professor Kennedy said. Professor Washaw also said a fair map in Indiana could very well still yield Republican victories. The races would just be more competitive. Voting rights activists say it's about creating districts where incumbents do not feel like wins are guaranteed and voters feel accurately represented within their districts. Experts say feelings of disenfranchisement can result in low voter turnout rates as voters feel the winner has won before the polls even open. Gerrymandering creates voter apathy. Voter apathy isn't just, well, I don't care what happens in my country. It's the result of saying, no matter what I do in the voting booth, it's not going to make a difference, Professor Kennedy said. Indiana ranked in the bottom 10 in voter turnout for the past decade, and last in all the states, among all of the states in 2014. In 2020, 5 redistricting bills were introduced to the legislature, which would have created a redistricting portal for citizens to draw maps and mandate change hearings for more public input. All 5 died in committee. And here's the main point, folks. It really is the main point. Nobody these days relinquishes power simply because it's the right thing to do or because it's good government. They're not going to willingly cede authority, Professor Kennedy said. The question is, do we want to retain our position as a democratic republic? And do we believe that people should rule? Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Ben Dillon. On deck, Ben Dillon. Welcome, Mayor.
It's not mayor anymore.
Former mayor.
Okay. I appreciate you folks having these hearings around the state and offering the possibility that people could draw the districts themselves. However, they don't have the sophisticated software and the ability to balance districts by population and know where all the votes are of certain categories. I agree with almost everything that Dave Geyer read, okay, about redistricting. And this is true of Democrats when they were in power in Indiana and Republicans. But there's been talk about nonpartisan redistricting in the legislature in recent years quite a bit. But things never get out of, either they don't get a hearing in committee or they don't get out of committee. So I would guess there's a lot of cynicism in this room right now, that this is window dressing. Here it would be window dressing if the Democrats were in charge, okay? Because the Democrats did it, Republicans did it. So I've been in local politics since 1975, so I've been through a fair number of local redistrictings. And I can only speak for Goshen, but if you look at Goshen's districts, they are relative. What we're required to do is make them relatively compact, and the smallest one in population can't vary more than 10% from the largest one in population. I don't know if that same thing applies to the state of Indiana. But if you did what Goshen has done, the districts would look a whole lot different than they do now. So my question is, and you don't have to answer this, but my question is, you all send out surveys to your constituents. And if you're not in power, you send out surveys that say that you believe in nonpartisan districting. If you are in power, I haven't seen one from my Republican legislators that asks me if I'm in favor of nonpartisan redistricting. So maybe a rhetorical question, but we can talk about this forever, and if you polled your constituents, you would see the majority favor it. But the question is, how will we ever get to it?
Ben Dillon is up. On deck is Stephen Drendel. Ben Dillon from South Bend, welcome.
Thank you. Every 10 years we have a census and have to do the redistricting. And every year the minority cries foul, cries gerrymandering. And the majority says, but if this is required, and this is a majority any way you slice it, and the minority still cries foul. This has increased over the last 30 years. What else has increased in the same time? The answer, I teach mathematics and computer science. Computer science power has increased over the last 30 years. The ability to analyze big data, voter data, has increased over the last 30 years. To the point that I believe it's actually possible to draw a map that would be supported unanimously by the state legislature. And the headlines would all say 100% bipartisanship. However, the reason it would be unanimous is that every legislator would have had a safe district drawn for him or her. And what do I mean by safe? I mean that there is no significant contest in the general election. Only the primary would have a significant contest. And the primaries are smaller because you're slicing the electorate in half, Democrat, Republican, and fewer voters come out for the primaries. Who remains that does vote in those primaries? The answer is the passionate voters, the people in this room, for example, of both sides. Who else votes? The most passionate voters. The ones who are more likely to elect extreme legislators. We've also already seen this from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the left to Marjorie Taylor Greene on the right. By the way, you may think I'm talking about Indiana, but I'm actually talking pretty much about California. To the point where it's increased, the partisanship has increased so much in California, now there are multiple initiatives to split the state up into multiple states. And there's a movement among the rural counties of Oregon to join Idaho. I'm not kidding, that's called the Greater Idaho. So I'd like to reframe this debate a little bit as both parties trying to avoid electing their own fringe elements and trying to elect those who are willing to work across the aisle for bipartisan goals. And if those extremists, for lack of a better word, are in the legislature themselves and get to have a hand in drawing the maps, this will never improve. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Grindle, Ranger on deck, Jane Bueller. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, and thank you all for this opportunity. When each one of you representatives ran for office, you trusted your voters to make the best decision about who would represent them best. You, of course, thought you were the ones. You trust them then. Why don't you trust your voters to do the redistricting? I respectfully disagree with the former mayor. Common Cause, the League of Women Voters, and the other groups who are nonpartisan, quote, good government, close quote, groups, have plenty of computer power, have all the sophisticated tools to draw fair districts, legally balanced population districts that respect political boundaries, which are the guidelines that you have to follow in coming up with your maps. They hand out those tools to voters so that voters can come up with their own attempt at maps. But the final arbiter needs to be a nonpartisan, respected organization, and there are plenty in Indiana. You all and your colleagues have a vested interest in protecting your own re-election, and your parties have a vested interest in protecting their position in the legislature. It's a blatant conflict of interest for you to be drawing and having the final say. Unethical act every time you do so. The tools are available. Over a third of the states have found the mechanism to allow nonpartisan citizen groups to draw maps. Indiana needs to get on board.
Bueller on deck, Pat Rizutko, Jane Bueller from Goshen, welcome.
It's Buller, but that's
Bueller,
okay.
I apologize.
Yeah, I'd like to speak just personally. I would reiterate some of the things that have already been said, but I'd also like to say that I embody somebody who over the last few elections has become quite cynical. And I feel like I am not represented in a country that was started with the idea that people should be represented in their government. I've looked, and I'm not real savvy about it, but I have tried to find out what kinds of percentages the Indiana public would have in terms of Republican and Democrat affiliations. And you might know that statistic, and I'd be glad to know it personally. But I don't think that what I see in the representative group or the Senate group is representative of our population here. And so I would like to also say that I speak wishing, but with a lot of cynicism, that you would put together a committee that would be non-partisan, if you want to use that word, a group that would be looking for the greatest good, not even the greater good, but the greatest good that could help heal a country that has really become quite divided. And the gentleman that said about reaching across the aisles, I think is extremely important in our time right now. Although we need those edgy voices too.
Rizutko on deck, Stephen Wilder. Pat Rizutko from Elkhart, welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having this. And I hope you all listen. I agree with most everything everyone has said. We've all become cynical. I kind of believe now I get to vote, and it really doesn't matter. You just let me think it does. I hope that you would get the knowledge and have the courage to do what is right for the people of this state, not just for yourself or for your party, whichever it may be.
Stephen Wilder on deck, Bob Raz. Stephen Wilder from Elkhart.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Wilder. I've voted in Elkhart since 1990, and right now I have virtually no representation in Congress or the state legislature, thanks in large part to gerrymandering. On February 11th, 1812, Massachusetts Governor Elbridge Gerry, yes, he pronounced it with a hard G, reluctantly signed a redistricting bill designed to keep his Republican Party in power. I should mention that this was a Jeffersonian Republican Party, the predecessor of today's Democratic Party. Discontent with James Madison's foreign policy seemed likely to bring Federalists back in power, so the Republican legislature redrew the state Senate districts to concentrate Federalists in a few districts and keep the Jeffersonians in power. It worked. Republicans won 29 seats to the Federalists' 11. The Essex district had a particularly bizarre shape. The story goes that the editor of the Boston Gazette posted the new map on his office wall, and in talking to a federal editor, he compared the Essex district to a salamander. Salamander? Call it a gerrymander, was the reply. And for that, engraver Elkanah Tisdale produced the famous monstrous gerrymander cartoon. This is the Elbridge Gerry was a signer of the Declaration of Independence and James Madison's second vice president, but today his legacy is the gerrymander, which doesn't even pronounce his name right. I think most of us Democrats believe these meetings are a charade and that the current Republican Party will continue to gerrymander. I challenge you to prove me wrong and to adopt a fairer redistricting plan. I grew up in Iowa, and in 1980, the Iowa legislature, under the moderate Republican governor, Robert Gray, yes, there were such people back then, created a redistricting plan that put the drawing of the maps into nonpartisan hands, but still required the approval of the legislature. Under the Iowa model, nonpartisan staff of the state's legislative service agency draw the maps. They're prohibited from using political data. They're assisted by a temporary redistrict commission, which provides guidance and advice, but once a map is drawn, conducts at least 3 public hearings and submits a map to the General Assembly. It's a quick process, within 45 days of the state receiving data from the Census Bureau. The legislature conducts an up or down vote on the map. If it rejects it, the LSA has 35 days to submit a new map. If the second plan is rejected, the LSA submits a third map, also within 35 days, which is subject to amendment. Should no map plan be enacted by September 1st of the year ending in 1, the state Supreme Court has this responsibility to redraw the maps. Because the pandemic has delayed the data from the census, and because these hearings are taking place too late for the legislature to recreate the Iowa model in toto, I urge the legislature to take some of its elements, a nonpartisan commission to draw the maps, and the prohibition of political data in the redistricting process. I don't expect it from the current legislature and government, but I'm here. Prove me wrong. Thank you for your time.
Keep going. On deck, Bob Raz from Osceola, my hometown.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Bob Raz, and I am a resident of Osceola and also a resident representative West Coast District 21. So I'm glad that you're here and I get to talk to you in person. It's nice. I'm going to try and take about 5 minutes if you don't mind. But I did write it because my wife said you'll talk on forever. You have to thank her. First of all, not everybody knows it, but I think we're all here today because Karl Rove, as you know who Karl Rove is, figured out how the Republican Party could dominate state legislatures in 2008. It's really uncomfortable to be talking backwards, but that's okay. I'm talking to these people right here. Right? It was called Project Red Map, and for a modest investment of $30 million, I think that's about how much Wesco spends on his campaign. They targeted 107 legislative races around the entire country, including Indiana. They won big. And that began the political domination of the majority of states in the U.S. The Red Map warriors then used these new majorities to draw the legislative boundary maps based upon the new 2010 census. And those maps favored the Republicans. So now, in 2021, we have a 71% Republican majority in the Indiana State House and a 78% majority in our state Senate. No wonder we feel like our vote doesn't count. I agree with everybody. I can't do anything in my district 21 to change anything, as far as I can tell. And just for good measure, we have a 78% majority of Republican U.S. representatives. What a surprise. And you know, while mentioning percentages, I should not ignore the fact that only 15% of our state and federal elected representatives are women. And we have a lot of work to do in that respect. It actually makes me absolutely mad that we have so many damn men running our legislatures. The parties themselves to start recruiting. We have such outstandingly good women in every single state. Anyway, I'll get off that topic. These statistics and the tactics used to arrive where we are today are quite intimidating to anyone like me who would really like my vote to count. You know, playing fair requires agreement on the truth and agreement on facts. I'm going to quickly go through a list of a few examples of the sad state of Indiana's bottom rankings among the states and how our state is doing in making voting as easy and seamless as possible. And thanks to some people that have already mentioned a few of these things, but I would like to repeat maybe a couple of them. A highly respected national annual cost of voting report, it's an annual report that's done, it's a scholarly report. It was done in 2020 and shows the barriers to voting in every state. Indiana is way, way down at number 41 on the list. That means that 40 states, 80% of them, have less burdensome voting methods than we Hoosiers have. A very recent 2021 study that was mentioned already by Dr. Christopher Warshaw of George Washington University, which I believe actually should be mandatory reading for every one of our legislators. It really should be. It's an excellent 42-page document, and it's a scholarly document. It includes 50 years of research of legislative activity in Indiana. He used data and maps from the past 50 years to show that Indiana political district maps were well balanced until the beginning of the 21st century. Along came Karl Rove. This is a well-documented 41-page analysis, as I mentioned. In 2011, the Republicans in Indiana redrew the political maps to their advantage. The result, according to his research, Indiana's maps are, and this is a quote, Indiana's maps are more biased towards one party than 95% of all other U.S. districting plans for which data is available over the past 50 years. Indiana's 2011 districting plan has a very large pro-Republican bias. Based on a variety of metrics, the pro-Republican bias in Indiana's congressional and state legislative districting plans is extremely large relative to other states. Well, as I mentioned, I do live in Representative Wesco's district, and it really is a pretty well gerrymandered district. It kind of looks, if you look at the map, it looks kind of like the head of an elephant. I don't know. I think it's great. I live in the trunk. There's a trunk that goes up from the district. Almost, I don't know why they didn't just go to the Michigan border, but it's about maybe 3 blocks from the Michigan border to the north, and it goes a long way south. So it's kind of a skewed looking thing. You know, I talk with neighbors and others in my subdivision who they don't vote because they figure that one party has their territory locked up. That's one feature of gerrymandering, at least the voter apathy. And we have a lot of apathy in Indiana. Look what's our turnout that somebody mentioned, 45%. One of the lowest in the country. Well, no wonder.
Robert, if you could read.
I'm going to speed up. Thank you. I'll take, if somebody would surrender some of their time. You know, point of personal privilege, perhaps. I'm getting there. Almost done. I have a son and daughter who live in the state of Washington near Seattle. They just automatically get their ballots in the mail without having to ask for them. This is what a nice thing. They love it, and they can't understand why it's not the norm across the country. Well, if Washington, Colorado, Hawaii, and Oregon can do it, along with even a red state like Idaho, it can be done in Indiana. You can actually mail up We really won't cheat. We haven't found anybody that's cheating. The Heritage Foundation searched high and low, and you know the Heritage Foundation just hired one of our own, Vice President Pence, to be a lecturer for them. But they only found 1,285 instances of cheating over 4 years, and they announced it as a big deal.
Robert, I appreciate the comments on elections. Our focus is on redistricting, and
okay.
Please conclude your remarks.
Thank you. There must be transparency how the maps are drawn. We need to get the details of how the process works, and the input of the public must be taken seriously. Voters in Indiana should have plenty of time, at least 6 weeks in the process, to review the maps that have been drawn by the legislature. Full consideration should be given by the legislature to the maps that will be coming from the Indiana Citizens Redistricting Commission. I really tell you to pay attention to those maps. All Hoosier legislators should read the Christopher Warshaw study, which I mentioned already. And last, let us have a theme for the Republicans in Indiana. I've thought a little bit about this. So we brought Abraham Lincoln and Jesus into the drawing room. How would you draw the maps? Thank you.
Gene Bowen on deck. Sam Yoder. Gene from Elkhart. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate your allowing me to address the hearing conveners and all those who are present here this afternoon. I've been a resident of Elkhart County for the last 23 years. I've never missed an opportunity to vote since the first time I was eligible to vote, several states ago. My remarks will be brief, so you'll get back the extra time that the previous speaker took. I think that public hearings and input after the proposed redistricting maps are publicly available is absolutely essential. Hearings before we even know what the census data tell us or what the maps look like is honestly premature. And you owe it to every citizen in this state to have public hearings just like this one after your maps are published and to allow sufficient time for citizens to comment. The older speaker, who's the mathematician, I'm married to a mathematician, and I think that the initial redistricting maps should actually be drawn. You should start from ground zero, and you should draw them using mathematical algorithms that distribute the population equitably among the districts that are drawn in the most compact way possible. So we don't get snaky little districts that meander all over the state. You can use current political boundaries to consider that first draft, but they should be relatively compact so that people are fairly represented in those districts. Deviations from those initial drawings should have a persuasive, nonpartisan reason for making those deviations, and they should be publicly disclosed, including the individual or group that's proposing changing the compact boundaries and the rationale for changing them. Fairly and equitably drawn and legally balanced districts benefit every Hoosier and help to ensure that the voters select their representatives, not the other way around. Not one of today's commenters thus far has spoken favorably about the current gerrymandered districts in the state of Indiana. You should take that seriously. There's something wrong if nobody says, gee, we're doing a great job, let's do it again for the next 10 years. And I hope each and every one of you is listening carefully today and at all the hearings you're having right now, and that you will act responsibly on the comments that are shared by the citizens who elect you. Thank you.
Sam Yoder. On deck, Jay Little. Sam Yoder from Bristol, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate each of your listening to us this afternoon, spending time doing that. I thank you. And I want to express appreciation also for the speakers who have spoken thus far. Very articulately, they've said pretty much everything that I feel and want to express. And yet I want to just speak as a person of faith. I believe that many of you legislators are also people of faith. And I believe we serve a God whose concern for justice ranks right up at the very highest concern for the Creator. And I encourage you, I ask you, I beg you to think about what your Creator desires of you as you fill such an important post representing so many of us. And so let your conscience direct you. Let the one who created you direct you as you pursue redistricting. Thank you.
Jay Little on deck, Gail Betterman. Jay Little from Elkhart, welcome.
Hello, Mr. Wesco. One of the things that I wanted to point out is that in this room there are no Hispanics that I can see right now. Is there anybody here that's Hispanic?
I'm right here.
Okay, so there's 3. How many African Americans do we have? There's not enough. Everybody else is Caucasian here. That is the first problem. Mr. Wesco, I live in your district. I represent Concord Precinct 11. Its voting average is about 12%, even in presidential elections, which sucks. That sucks. And the district immediately north of it, Concord 12, about the same. And the people that live there don't look like you and I for the most part. They look like her, the lady over there. They don't look like you. They don't look like you at all. Now then, let's also talk about the history of the United States. In this room, we have a lot of men, we have women, but let's talk about like when people were allowed to vote. When the original Constitution was passed in the year 1790, the only people that could vote were white that owned land, that were men. Men and white and landowners. So in this room, I wonder how many people actually own land today. Because if they did, then they could vote by 1790 rules. Okay? And Mr. Grimes that's standing back there, his group of people, if they were south of the Mason-Dixon line, were only counted as 3/5 of a person, which is sick if you think about it. And we have had laws that prohibited people, and they've had to fight. They've had to go out in the streets to get those rights to vote, women, men. You and I are Caucasian. We have had God-given rights because we just get them. But let me tell you that there's a group of people that don't have that. And sometimes I don't think you hear from them very well because, especially in your district, let's point it out. The last number of years when there's been an election in your district, whether it was Jackie before you or you yourself, the Democrats have not done any better than 40%, ever. And usually it's lower than about 30 against you or Jackie. And that means that there's a lot of unfairness just with your district alone. Let's just talk about your district, because I think that that's an important thing. One other thing that another person said before me that I think is really, really, really important is that we have too many people that are fringe from either the right or the left, and we don't have people that can work together. I hate having to give history lessons to people that are educated. It really pisses me off as an educated person that I have to come up here and I have to be this blunt. But hear me, because I see things and I'm pissed about it, and I'm white. You can only imagine if I were black or Hispanic. I might not be able to be contained. Do I make myself clear to all of you? I think the thing is that we need to have fair, much fair, and it's possible to do it. We have algorithms, we have other things like that. You know, I built a computer in 1985 with a Z80 chip at Vincennes University. The smartphone that I have in my pocket can do probably 1,000 times more percentages of calculations. And my phone's 3 years old than that chip could do. That's a Z80 chip made by Zenith Corporation, in case anybody here doubts what it is. Okay? But again, I'm disappointed that there are not more people of color here that represent, especially your district, because you're the one hosting this. And this is in your district. And I don't think you've heard this. I don't think you've heard enough from these people. You don't come to the south side of Elkhart, to south central Elkhart. Somebody who you spent $45,000, you gave a donation to them for a city council race, lost markedly badly, that being Brian Dickerson. And I know that you spent $45,000 on that campaign. That should tell you something.
If you could please begin to bring your comments to a close.
That's all I have to say.
Neil Betterman. On deck, Thomas Rogesta. Gail Betterman from South Bend.
Thank you. First of all, I wanted to thank, I guess people have done, but I want to say again, thank you for hosting this. And especially, I have to say, I'm a college professor. I teach history. Thank you all for talking about so much history. But I teach history, American history at the University of Notre Dame. I could not bear to sit up there and let all my students, people, we're not students, talk to me and not answer back. So bless you guys for doing that. You're pennies in heaven and all that stuff. I should say, in case you're wondering, everybody here is probably relatively liberal. I am liberal myself. I have lived in South Bend since 1992 when I came to work at the University of Notre Dame. I had, Tim Romer as a Democrat. Then things were redistricting, and we got Chris Chicola, right? And then, as I recall, after that, Donnelly, right? And then things were redistricted, and I am, how do I say, unhappily reconciled to never having a Democratic congressperson again in my whole life. I want to say also that there's a certain way in which democracy, if districts are set up, you lose a lot of the time. I'll be 70 years old next year. I lived with a lot of people as representatives I didn't vote for. It's life, right? You live with that. If the districting is fair and clear, okay, I've already identified myself as a college professor, an old college professor who works with young students, right? And somebody who's been around for a while. So that's where I want to make my main point, I think. I am privileged enough to work as an older person with people in their 20s and get a sense of what the world looks like to them, right? And I compare what I learned America was, and America was for, way back in the 50s and 60s, right? With what they learned. And it's scary, because they learn not just from the schools, like we all learned, yada, 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 democracy, but they learn from what they see. They learn from what they see. And what they've learned is that democracy is a sham. In fact, they think democracy's always been a sham, because kids think what things are like now has always been that way, right? I grew up thinking with the people in the 19th century who believed that vox populi, vox dei, the voice of the people is the voice of God. Everybody's together. They consider the issues, and they vote for the people in charge. It didn't always work that way, but that was the ideal. That's not even their ideal anymore. They don't believe in that any more than they believe in Santa Claus. So, I will ask you, I'm not going to make mathematical models. I haven't taught any. I've studied dead people. I've done that for you. I'm a historian, right? But when you think about districting, and I hope you will think about districting in a way so that each district, the voices of the people can contend together and come up with the voice of God or whatever. But however you do it, please think of the process pedagogically, because I beg of you to not only be transparent, but be vocally transparent. Show these kids how does it work. Because they have no idea how it works. They don't even think they're supposed to know how it works. Because from their point of view, the Democrats and the Republicans are far more essential to the Constitution than the legislature, the executive, or the courts. That's all they know. That's all they see. So if you could show them how it works, in the Constitution and a thing that could be bipartisan, that would do incredibly much good. Thank you.
Dorinda Heidingus on deck. Thomas Regusta from Osceola, welcome.
Thank you. I lived in Elkhart County for 20 years, approximately, and got remarried 35 years ago this month. And then 3 years ago, we downsized and moved into St. Joe County. My wife is not from this area. She's from Rockford, Illinois. And we talked about voting. And I said, well, my dad always read about every candidate in the South Bend Tribune. And he decided who he thought would be the best candidate, no matter what party they was, because of their background and what they've done. And she said, that's great, but there's no sense of us even going to the polls, even though we do, because no matter who or how we vote, Republicans are going to get 85% or better in there, and they have for how long now. We really need to get these boundaries changed so that the voters can feel like they're actually doing something. Right now, it just seems like there's no use going to the poll, the way it is. Thank you.
Dorinda Heidingus on deck. Stephen Guzman. Dorinda Heidingus. Stephen Guzman. James LaBelle. James LaBelle, you would come forward and speak. On deck, Daniel Grimes. Welcome, James, from South Bend.
Thank you. Yes, my name is James LaBelle. I'm from South Bend, interloper here a little bit. I want to thank everybody for coming out today, but that message is directed to everybody standing behind me. Not anybody, and not including the media, but not anybody standing in front of me. Because I doubt seriously that anybody sitting at the desk up here, if they had an honest choice, they would not be here today. Okay, they're really busy folks, and they don't have time to come out here and see the folks out here in the hinterland. Okay? And we're not going to get anything changed, no matter how much talking goes on. But until we have some way to get the inmates out of control of the asylum, we're not going to have any change made. So there are plenty of ways to redistrict, as long as nothing is associated with the political party. And whether you have an algorithm that people would have question about or what, I mean, there's a lot of smarter people than I am that can figure that sort of thing out. But it's got to be a totally nonpartisan, unbiased redistricting, whatever. But it's not going to happen. You can't just say, well, we need bipartisanship, because you're never going to get it. Everybody has a political view, and they're never going to be able to disassociate that. So until you have either a college class that goes through that, if you can get somebody that's not uber liberal in college anymore, to redistrict it. So the thing that, and to a certain degree, as far as I'm concerned, this is an exercise in frustration, and there's nothing going to come of this meeting. Okay, You're not going to convince me of that, because again, the inmates are running the asylum, and you folks are supposed to be working for us instead of us working for you. And that's how every redistricting is done, so that we work for you. We vote, supposedly, to keep you in power. And power is the main goal of redistricting. And you can't look at it any other way, otherwise you wouldn't have all these crazy districts in the state. So it can be done, but it takes some cojones on the part of the politicians, since they won't do it, or they won't have anybody else do it. Hey.
On deck, Judith Davis, Daniel Grimes from Goshen. Welcome.
I appreciate you having these hearings today, and I don't have a lot to add to what has already been said, but I just want to start by just saying that I believe in representative democracy, and that's why I'm here. And I recognize every day that the privileges that I have were not available to my forefathers and foremothers. And it's only through the democratic process that progress has been made so that we can form a more perfect union. And this is the first time in my life, and I have never missed an election since I was eligible to vote at the age of 18. So I haven't missed an election in over 47 years. Primary, general election, I never miss one, because I believe in democracy, and democracy can be such a powerful force. However, in Indiana, so few people believe in democracy anymore. They believe that it's a lost cause, that the legislature doesn't really care, and that the gerrymandered districts aren't designed to be representative. They're designed to hold those in power to continue to hold power. And so my plea today is that there be nonpartisan districts throughout the state, that they be as compact as possible, that they follow the lines that are already established, municipal lines that are already established, be they county or township, and that they be compact. And part of that is that as a former elected official in Goshen, people are confused about who represents them. And so the more confusion we create, the less likely people are to believe in the system, the less likely to vote, the less likely they are to know who to contact. And so we need to make it as easy and understandable as possible. That's how we increase, as far as participation and democracy in this country. And the things that we can do here are very important, because there's so many things happening in Washington and national level that we don't have the same ability to influence. So my plea is for you to take hold of the things that you can change, recognize those things, and don't create districts where you select the voters. Let the voters select the representatives. Thank you.
On deck, Sophia Gladden, Judith Davis from Goshen. On deck, Sophia Gladden. Welcome, Judith.
Hello, thank you. I'm Judith Davis, and I am a registered Republican. Because when I moved to Indiana 40 years ago, I was told, well, you better register Republican or you won't be able to vote. That's not quite true. I can vote in the primaries and have my vote count, but I can vote in the general elections where my vote does not count at all. It's a little tiresome after 40 years of believing firmly in the democratic process that I'm a rhino, and a proud rhino, as I have been called by some people in Goshen. And if I'm a little cynical about the process here today, I am joined by 84% of people who responded to a Goshen News poll question last week. Do you think that the hearings coming up will make any difference 84% of the respondents said no. I think you might want to take a lesson from that.
Sophia Gladden. On deck, Haley Reed. Sophia Goshen, welcome.
Hi, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you all for coming. I'm fairly new to voting. I was eligible to vote for the first time in the 2018 midterm elections, and I have not skipped an election since, but that's only 2 elections, so it's not that great or impressive. Something I've become very passionate about is encouraging people to participate in elections, but especially among younger populations. I've heard many times people think that voting is just a waste of their time. A lot of my friends didn't vote in this past election because they honestly thought that their vote wouldn't make a difference. You know, like an earlier speaker said, sometimes it feels as though the election is decided before the polls even open. I hear the sentiment expressed from young voters from both parties. I think that fair redistricting could definitely increase voter participation in the state. Voter apathy is certainly a national issue, but we have the ability to address the voter apathy in this state with this redistricting. I urge you to act responsibly and ethically in this next redistricting, and thank you very much for your time and for allowing me to speak.
Haley Reed. On deck, Brad Skiles. Haley Reed from Mishawaka. Welcome.
Hello. So I am registered with no party. A lot of my friends and I are disillusioned with the system a little bit. We don't really think electoralism works anymore, so we try to do things outside of it. I do think everybody deserves a voice, so I would just ask that the politicians not choose their voters, that the voters choose their politicians, and you can do that multiple ways. People have stated it multiple times today, and I just want to ask that you please do the right thing and do your jobs and make sure that our districts make sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Brad Skiles. On deck, Aaron Mishler. Brad Skiles from Warsaw. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. I assume you do want to be here. And I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you being willing to do this. What's occurred to me as I've heard all of this is I think everyone, obviously, is very skeptical of this process. And I think our common sense tells us that it's a subjective process, which is what I assumed it was. It makes sense. So what I'm thinking is this is a huge problem. And probably many of you are not responsible for where you find yourselves today, and that 10 years ago, these districts were structured in a way that favored an outcome that was very subjective. And I appreciate what you're trying to do to add some degree of neutrality to it, but I think you can see that this room is filled with skeptics. And as someone who's on the opposite side of many of these people, in my district, 22, I'm very concerned about a representative who is not in the groove of the Republican Party and how redistricting could work to remove someone that we actually want. And I know you said earlier today that the rumors of redistricting 22 and 93 were rumors. But I tell you, what I'm hearing today are a lot of people that believe this is very subjective. And so if it's subjective, it means there's a slant that I call it the swamp has to try to achieve something through redistricting. And I think you have quite a challenge to overcome what the populace is feeling. And what's also, it does relate to elections. But what I've noticed is that on March 26th of 2020, HBO had a documentary that was largely using Democrats to say our voting system was terribly flawed and that electronic machines could easily be hacked. And I would just encourage, if you haven't seen Kill Chain, which was the HBO documentary from 2020, that is an issue And Indiana still endorses the Minion voting machines, which have been proved to be hacked. Okay, so the point is that skepticism in our general election is related to redistricting. And you're building on a very shaky foundation of people who don't feel their vote counts, and it's a combination of systems that are not accurate and redistricting that is very subjective. Thank you.
This is great. Aaron Mishler. On deck, Terry Wood. Aaron Mishler from Elkhart. Welcome.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for coming. I kind of have a unique perspective in this, is as I currently sit as proudly representing the 1st District of the City of Elkhart on City Council. And when you guys are done, I'll encourage you to head downtown and enjoy some of the shops we have down there. But secondly, I ran for State House in a very gerrymandered seat last year. The reason I ran for Indiana House 48 was because no one else wanted to do it. And the reason that nobody else wanted to do it is because they felt that the seat was so heavily gerrymandered that no matter how much money they raised, no matter how many doors they knocked on, that it was not going to matter. And I think a lot of folks in my generation, they want to serve. I served in the Indiana Army National Guard before I served on council, and a lot of my fellow veterans would like to serve as well. However, they see these gerrymandered maps, and they wonder, what's the point? Because I did what I could. I raised funds, I knocked on doors, I did all the things that a representative is supposed to do. However, my opponent, because the district is so heavily gerrymandered, didn't even agree to debate, because he knew that he could just ride the district into victory, and that's exactly what happened. And I understand, once you're elected, that you want to continue to do good things. That I myself on city council feel like I'm doing a good job. And there's a temptation amongst elected officials on either party, throughout the state, throughout the country, that let's just make it a little easier so we can keep doing that job. But that's not our job. Our job is to let our residents and our constituents decide if we're doing a good job. So let's work together. Let's work together to end the cynicism that is growing in the youth, that keeps them from the civil service that we need throughout the state and throughout local, state, and federal government. Let's draw those nonpartisan lines. We have the computer algorithms, and it can be done. So I'm asking you, please, let's do this, and let's have fair and free, non-gerrymandered elections throughout the state of Indiana. Thank you.
On deck, Brian Smith, Terry Wood from Warsaw.
Good afternoon. I want to say thank you for holding this public forum, because this is about we, the people. We have a voice, and we are here to voice our concerns with what we see taking place in the political arenas in our state. We've heard several statistics already. The voter turnout, the apathy, the gerrymandering. But let's face it, the reality that if my vote is not a vote, one vote for one vote, it doesn't matter what you plan on doing with redistricting in our state. And we've seen evidence from across the country in the last number of months where a vote was not a vote. That's called free and fair elections. As our representation at the State House, I would like to know two things. Are we planning on maintaining electronic voting systems.
Sir, if you can speak toward redistricting.
It affects redistricting.
No.
It's fantasy.
The state of Indiana has been proven with evidence from across the country that electronic manipulation of votes in 2020.
No.
You have comments about redistricting?
I have plenty of comments about redistricting. Help us understand, as the general populace, why, as mentioned before, it is not vocal and transparent. How is it that we, as constituents who elect our representation, do not play a voice or have a voice in those redistricting plans? I agree with the person who spoke earlier who said, once those districts have been drawn up and those maps have been drawn up, there should be a fair time of assessment on behalf of the constituents that elect you folks to represent us for a fair analysis of those redistrictings. That's when we can be assured that a vote equals a vote. We, the people, demand to be heard and respected. Thank you.
Brian Smith on deck. Janet Vanega. Brian Smith from Leesburg.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'd like to talk about communities of interest in the redistricting process. We have some maps here in the background of the current congressional and state legislative districts. And in Congressional District 2, if you look in the portion of Kosciuszko County, you'll see like almost like a little thumb that comes out of Warsaw and Leesburg. And that little thumb is my house. That little thumb is a one precinct, and it's got 20 registered voters. It makes absolutely zero sense that it is the one precinct in Plain Township that is in Congressional District 2. And it's also absurd that Kosciuszko County is split into 2 congressional districts. We get our TV from South Bend. So the second largest city in the 3rd congressional district, which is Warsaw, has no idea what its congressional representative is doing because the South Bend TV networks really rarely ever cover Jim Banks. They cover Jackie Walorski. And no offense to the news media, I know you're busy, and also at campaign time, it's incredibly expensive to run TV ads in the Fort Wayne media market and the South Bend media market. So lots of times people in Warsaw think Jackie Walorski or her opponent is who we're voting for, when in reality, most of the people in Kosciuszko County that are in the 3rd district. So I ask you, and I implore you, Mr. Snow, as a resident of Kosciuszko County, please keep Kosciuszko County in 1 congressional district. Warsaw and Winona Lake are, from what I can find, the only 2 municipalities of at least 5,000 people in 1 township. It is absurd that they are in 2 congressional districts. The same township should be, all of Wayne Township should be in its own state representative district. And as someone who ran, also like Mr. Mishler, who ran for a state representative seat, it just does not make sense that Warsaw and Napanee are in 1 state legislative district, but Warsaw and Winona Lake, where you can't tell where one ends and one begins, are in different legislative districts. And I don't care if you put Kurt Knisley and Representative Snow in the state legislative district. I don't care as a member of District 22 if that happens. Thank you.
On deck, Judy Bradford. Janet from Elkhart, welcome.
Hi, thank you. My name's Janet Abanja, and I live in Elkhart, and I represent the League of Women Voters of Elkhart County. I'm the president this year, lucky to be that. And a couple of things. First of all, one of the things that we have, because of these very, very safe gerrymandered districts, we have a heck of a time getting people to agree to our debates. This is such a problem, I can't tell you, and it's just a symptom of the fact that they feel so safe that they don't have to come and speak at our debates, and they're like, what's in it for me? The only thing that a debate can do now is hurt me, because I'm going to win this election anyway. We run into that with so many people that I really hope we can do something about this. The other thing, though, that I want to talk a little bit more about is we've all been listening to everyone speak, and we can all, in the audience, I believe, relate to the fact that we have so many friends, we have children, we have nieces and nephews, and all of us are feeling very queasy about our democracy. When it comes to our children, we're hearing from their professors, and I'm hearing from them directly that they don't have faith in our democracy, and they don't feel like they can make a difference. When it comes to those of us who are a little bit older, we are scared to death. We saw what happened on January 6th. It scared us to death. And we are afraid that you all, again, you're coming, you're listening to us, but our democracy is hanging by a thread, many of us feel. You need to show us that it's not. You must show us that it's not hanging by a thread. And in order to do that, I really think that, first of all, you have got to be transparent. It's wonderful that you're talking to us today, but you've got to talk to us after the fact, after you've gone behind your closed doors, and after you have drawn your lines. You've got to come back, and you've got to face us, and you've got to say, here are our districts. You've got to look us in the eye and say, this is why we did this. Because I do believe that you are all very pragmatic people. You are not going to make changes in this situation unless there is some reason for you to do it. There is a room full of voters. And they should give you the reason to make these changes. We're not kidding up here. We are upset, we're scared, and we want to have faith in you. We do. But you've got to show us that that faith is not misplaced. Thank
you. Hernandez. Judy, welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Judy Bradford, and I'm here to speak as a citizen and also a member of the League of Women Voters of the South Bend area. The League was founded by leaders of the women's suffrage movement. For over 100 years, we've been a nonpartisan grassroots organization that believes that voters should play a critical role in democracy. Our core mission remains the same today as it was 100 years ago, to empower voters and defend democracy. This requires a well-informed electorate, a transparent decision-making process, and an ongoing opportunity for citizen engagement. It also requires an ability to convert votes cast into seats won and to translate public preferences into public policy. Thank you for the opportunity to bring my concerns to you. There's one concern in particular that I'd like to expand on. It's how non-competitive or incumbent-safe districts make me feel as a voter. And I like to think I'm a pretty average voter. Number one, they make me feel voiceless and ignored. An elected official who is in a safe district does not have to respond to my emails or phone calls. They also don't have to work with the opposing party to enact legislation. I love to see bipartisan efforts because it demonstrates to me that there is still hope for compromise and working together. But representatives in safe districts don't have to reach across the aisle. Why should they? They don't need those votes that might result in the next election from that shared bipartisan work. Number two, they make me feel utterly powerless. Candidates in safe districts don't really have to campaign or explain their views to me. In the 2nd Congressional District, we have not had a congressional town hall in almost a decade. And as already been stated, candidates in safe districts don't have to agree to debate their opponents. As a voter, that shuts me out because I can't compare one candidate side by side with another in the same venue. I can't hear how they respond to audience questions or how patient or impatient they might be with the public. As an independent voter who has voted for both Republicans and Democrats, I like to compare all candidates in a race and vote for the best person for the job. Number three, and the final point, what gets me most is that I feel less than a citizen because safe districts sometimes produce uncontested races. The opposite political party just gives up and doesn't present a candidate for a race. I feel I have no choice, so why bother voting at all? When voters don't have an opportunity to choose their elected officials, they don't feel empowered as citizens. This flies in the face of participation, which is the bedrock of democracy. We need to feel engaged. In closing, I urge you to read the ICRC report and pay attention to all of their recommendations. That's the Indiana Citizens Redistricting Commission report, including the one that advises the drawing of competitive districts to promote representation. My concerns are about representation, accessibility, and accountability, no matter who draws the lines, Democrat, Republicans, or independents. The redistricting process needs to serve voters, not politicians. Only then can we stop this downward spiral away from a truly representative democracy.
And that's on deck, Molly B. Moon. Welcome right now.
I just want to echo what Judy has said. This process should be about serving and representing voters. This includes taking account of the communities in which they live. Don't combine clashing communities of interest in the same district. This is especially a problem for people living in the largest cities in Indiana, including South Bend. When the community is divided into multiple districts, it is confusing for voters and can make it difficult for community organizations to educate the community and for communities and neighborhoods to get the representation that they need. This is problematic in districts that combine rural areas with urban areas. We urge the legislature to divide cities and counties into as few districts as possible, ensuring that urban as well as rural voters are fairly represented. From Fort Wayne to Greencastle, there were numerous examples of cities and counties divided into far more districts than their population would seem to justify, creating confusion and again serving to reduce the political influence of the community. Constituents in these districts often have very different needs and concerns, making it difficult for their legislators to fully represent everyone. It's also difficult for neighborhoods, as in the urban areas. And I want to say that was the issue in my neighborhood that got me involved in redistricting. Prior to that, I had no idea what it was all about. And the city was planning to come in and redevelop a bunch of, not the whole neighborhood, but a bunch of it. And we decided we needed to talk to our city councilman. And when we looked at the maps, we were the tag end of 4 different city council districts. So being the tag end of the district meant nobody cared about us. But they tried to convince us that 4 of them were concerned about us, plus the 3 at large. And that was not the case. So we worked and fought and finally got some redistricting done that at least cut it down to a couple. It wasn't entirely one single district, but that's what made it clear to me that a community of interest like a neighborhood where people are already working together on problems in that area, they need one voice on the city council who's going to speak for them. And I can extrapolate from that it would be the same in the legislature. I want to stress that this isn't about partisanship. It is about empowering communities to participate in the political process and to have their interests represented and their voices heard in the policy-making process. So please be transparent about the criteria that you use to draw the district lines. Please give the public at least a month to weigh in on the districts you create. Sometimes the best way to know if your districts are fair is to give towns, neighborhood associations, and other communities an opportunity to weigh in by indicating when a group with common political, economic, and cultural interest has been divided in ways that harm their ability to be fairly represented and heard in the policy-making process.
Molly Moon on deck, Pam Wycliffe. Molly Moon from South Bend, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm delighted to find myself here. My name is Molly B. Moon. I am the Director of Administration for the League of Women Voters of the South Bend area. On the League's behalf, I thank Representative Westco and all of you for hosting this opportunity to speak on redistricting. As my associate Glenda Ray noted, transparency, and this hearing itself is a good example of transparency, is absolutely critical. The public is understandably distrustful of a redistricting process that's controlled by the same people who will run for office in the new districts. They want an open and transparent process that gives them real opportunities to help shape the new districts and enough time to consider the proposed maps and provide deliberative feedback. To create a redistricting process that will result in the kind of districts the public wants, districts that reflect the communities in which we live, the Indiana General Assembly needs to prioritize transparency. Be upfront about this. Give the public the information we need to evaluate the redistricting proposals you present. Being deliberative and transparent about the redistricting criteria you choose to emphasize and making those choices public is critical in creating a fair process. This is important because redistricting involves making choices among competing interests. The public knows that. And the public deserves to know how these choices are made. No matter which spot on the political spectrum we occupy, we are all Hoosiers, we are all Americans, and we are all citizens of a participatory democracy. Such participation is a right of citizenship. So, to promote full transparency, all Hoosiers must have access to all the data the General Assembly will use to draw the maps. And when those proposed maps are introduced, legislators should also introduce which redistricting criteria were given priority. If consultants are hired to assist elected officials with redistricting, the contracts to engage the consultants should be disclosed. And the General Assembly should always strive to conduct the redistricting process in public. They should limit caucus or other private discussions that prevent public scrutiny. Moreover, as my lead colleagues have indicated, the public should be given time, at least 30 days of time, to study those proposed maps, to provide specific feedback, to express specific concerns, and to receive specific responses about how the maps will be revised to address any widespread community concerns. If you, our elected leaders, effectively use the tool of transparency throughout this process, you will inspire trust and confidence in we, the people of Indiana, and that is good leadership. Thank you.
Lopez. Pam Wycliffe from South Bend. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I am Pam Wycliffe, and I am also from the League of Women Voters from South Area, South Bend. And following up on another piece of redistricting, I thank you for hosting these public hearings. And much of what I'm going to be saying, I'm sure everybody has said all pretty much the same thing, but I'm going to reiterate. Thank you for hosting these hearings. I want to focus on the importance of public participation in the redistricting process. I appreciate this opportunity to talk about that process and the criteria used to draw the districts that will shape politics and political representation over the next decade. I hope you'll continue to invite public participation and make redistricting information and materials, including the criteria and data you use to draw the maps, accessible to the public at large. I agree also with the ICRC report. It is imperative to let the public know well in advance when the General Assembly will return for redistricting. Map makers should listen to the voices of the community and consider community mapping and redistricting plans proposed by local communities, by those who will be governed. Additional public hearings should be conducted in each congressional district after the initial legislative proposals become public. Hearings should be held both virtually and in person if public health conditions allow. An adequate time should be given for the public to study the redistricting proposals and provide feedback. In addition to public hearings, the House and Senate elections committees should review maps submitted by the public. And this has been said over and over. It's imperative that public involvement is a critical part of respecting the needs of the voters and the communities. We urge you to encourage and respond to public input about these communities of interest, and to ask the public for input specifically on their communities.
I encourage you to instruct the map drawers to acknowledge the communities of interest identified by the public. One way to gather this information is to look closely at the citizen-drawn maps produced as part of the competition sponsored by the Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission, that's the ICRC. Maps drawn by the public to identify their communities of interest can be uploaded and used by legislative map drawers to inform their decision-making and facilitate the drawing of districts that protect communities and bolster public confidence in the process. And for the folks who wish to draw their maps of their communities, you can go to the website districtr.org/Indiana, and you can draw your own maps and send it in to be looked at. Thanks again for holding these public hearings. My fellow League members and I look forward to participating in future hearings once the draft maps have been drawn. Doing your constitutional and statutory duty to draw maps every 10 years and to abide by the Voting Rights Act when creating contiguous districts isn't enough. In order to instill public trust in the process and to demonstrate your commitment to representative democracy, it is critical that transparency be always present, that our districts be incumbent blind, that they be geographically compact, yet allow for political competition and proportional representation. Thank you.
On deck, Donald Westerhausen. Welcome, Maria from Warsaw.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Duenas Lopez, and I grew up in Warsaw, Indiana. Equal and fair districting is a life or death issue for many people, and I'm here to tell you why. Growing up in Warsaw, growing up as a minority in Warsaw, voting wasn't something that my Latin family or friends were talked to about. Voting was something that other people did, that people whose vote actually mattered did. Because if we weren't talked to about voting, then that must mean that not only did our vote not matter, but we didn't either. Of course, that's not true, but I didn't realize that until I graduated high school and moved to Indy, to attend IUPUI in 2016. In Indy, I saw a lot more people that looked like me in office. I saw more Democrats in office. And in 2016, more people that looked like me getting involved in the voting process. And because of all the representation, I also saw more resources for the community, more efforts to close the higher education gap, and more efforts to close the school-to-prison pipeline. For all the minorities growing up in rural towns, we shouldn't have to move to another city to realize that our worth is equal and we deserve more investment in our community. The way districts are drawn today, we don't have representation that looks like our culture-rich neighborhoods. And because of that lack of representation, we lack the resources and investments in our communities that interrupt the cycle of poverty. We need to pay attention to the wider message we're sending to the people in our neighborhoods about their worth in society. The way districts are drawn right now send a message that the people that hold office in my district don't care about the issues that are most important to people that look like me. Equal and fair districting is not only the moral thing to do, it's also imperative to send a message to all the young and old minorities in these towns that they are valued and their worth is equal and their needs are just as important. This is an issue about more than just voting. For minorities in Indiana, equal and fair districting is a life or death issue. It could mean the difference between receiving resources and investment in our community or perpetuating the cycle of poverty and violence. Thank you.
On deck, Rajan Rahajat.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Don Westerhausen. I'm from Granger, Indiana. And I had just a few points that I wanted to make. One is, I disagree with the gentleman from Warsaw who's now gone. Redistricting is not subjective. It's laser focused. It can be very objective, especially with mathematical elders. Number two is, a few years ago, the Republican supermajority in the House and Senate, they had a study to look at redistricting. Where did that ever go? There was a few things about, Representative Bosma when he was head of the House, and there was concerns about how we were going to be able to do whatever the commission said. But it was basically the League of Women Voters who came out and said, let me start over. What basically this study said, which was, again, paid for by the taxpayers, the supermajority asked for it, and they said we should have basically a bipartisan commission to draw up districts. I'd like to know where that went. And then the League of Women Voters also said maybe this should be a nonpartisan commission to draw up districts. And you never saw whatever happened with that. And I guess, I look at that and I say, everybody wants transparency. Where was the transparency with that study, and where did that study go? I mean, I paid money for that study. The last thing is, I think that needs to be stated is, proportional representation. I'll be honest with you, I'm a proud Democrat. And I understand that Indiana is going to be a red state. And I get that. And I get that we need to hopefully work across the aisle. But over the last decade, there's been no working across the aisle. You haven't had to have one Democrat to have a quorum in the House or the Senate. If you look at the last Senate races, Indiana's easily 40% blue, 60% red, maybe 45, 55. But yet we have a 70% supermajority in both the House and the Senate. You don't need one Democrat to do business, and I think that's bad. And I'll tell you what, the thing is, if you had Democrats that had to be there for a quorum, the kind of bills that you guys are passing would look a lot different than they are. We're pretty late in the process, and we're going to be doing these districts so much later. It really gives an advantage to the incumbent. And so I think that it's incredibly important that we have transparency, but we also have an opportunity that after you all draw districts, that you get our input into that. And I would just ask that, as the most important point of my whole talk. Thanks.
Morris. Welcome, South Bend.
Good afternoon to all members of the committees here. I'm Ranjan Rahati from South Bend, professor of mathematics and statistics at St. Mary's College. I study gerrymandering from a mathematical point of view, and I'm a member of the Indiana Citizens Redistricting Commission. We are a multi-partisan group of Hoosiers, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and 3 who don't affiliate with either party. We held hearings on redistricting earlier this year, attended by nearly 1,000 Hoosiers. A recent national YouGov survey showed that 89% of voters, including 88% of Trump voters and 92% of Biden voters, opposed drawing districts that help one political party or certain politicians win. 91% say the districts should be drawn in a fair way that does not benefit their own party. And while only 25% say that they trust their state legislature to do the job, the majority say that the state legislature could be trusted to do the job if independent experts and leaders of both major parties agree that the maps are fair. This is where the Indiana Citizens Redistricting Commission comes in. Let us help you do your job and restore faith in the work that you're about to do. I want to focus on the transparency and public participation that were demanded at the hearings that we held. I'm going to focus on the process for this redistricting cycle, things that you all can do now. First, we urge the General Assembly to give the public easy online access to all the information and all the data you will use to draw proposed maps, and disclose the identity of any consultants you contract to help with redistricting, including making their contracts public. And to add to that, if you're going to hire someone to help with compliance with the Voting Rights Act, don't hire a political operative. There are well-qualified attorneys out there at IU or Notre Dame, for example, who can help. Secondly, you should conduct all redistricting proceedings in public. Avoid all discussions that prevent the public from hearing what was said. Third, when proposed maps are introduced by the General Assembly, disclose which redistricting criteria were prioritized. Fourth, if a proposed map does divide specific communities of interest or existing boundaries, including city, county, school district, provide a written report explaining why this was done. As you are doing now, conduct public hearings around the state after proposed maps are released so that Hoosiers who want to participate in the process can, and allow those who attend virtually to speak as well. Meetings should be held at different times during the week to enable engagement from as many people as possible. Sixth, give adequate time, at least a full month, after proposed maps are released to assure that the public has time to analyze the proposals and provide feedback. Seventh, we are pleased that the legislature has made mapping software publicly available and is inviting the public to submit maps for legislative consideration. The All In for Democracy Coalition has also built a website, and numerous Hoosiers have already been using it to become proficient with the software it utilizes, which is called District R. The software can be used without leaving your house. It's entirely online. The Elections Committee must consider citizen-drawn maps, regardless of whether they are drawn using the General Assembly-provided software or District R. Eighth, make all maps submitted through your online portal public and provide public access to the written testimony you receive regarding redistricting. Finally, my shirt says that democracy is not a spectator sport. Redistricting should not be either. Give the process to the Indiana Citizens Redistricting Commission. Let us participate. Don't make Hoosiers spectators. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Wesco, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I salute you for conducting these public hearings. I must be a minority person in this group because I'm a Republican. I'm not a cynic, and I do believe this meeting can make a positive difference in the redistricting process. The Indiana Citizens Redistricting Commission is a demonstration project intended to demonstrate how a nonpartisan or bipartisan group, however you want to describe us, can do an effective job of providing for fairer and more equitable redistricting. It comes about through All In for Indiana, which is a coalition made up by Common Cause Indiana, the League of Women Voters of Indiana, the NAACP of Indiana, and 23 other non-for-profit organizations who all believe that the creation of fairer, more equitable redistricting is going to be a major step forward for our state of Indiana. I got into the process because of my concern about low voter turnout. And particularly when we found Indiana dead last in voter turnout in 2014, we finally have improved a little bit. We're now 42nd out of 50 states, which is certainly not a respectable place to be. The more I researched, the more I was determined that redistricting is one of the real problems that's causing that low voter turnout. I do believe that you are now in a position, with the input you're receiving at these public hearings, to know that we have engaged voters who are informed about the impact of gerrymandering and who want to be helpful to you in the process of creating fairer, more equitable redistricting process. The ICRC wants to be a partner with you. We're not an adversary. We're a partner with you to help you get the job done. And we believe the work that we have done will help you see there are basically 4 key points that have been very clear in these hearings and in the public hearings that the ICRC conducted in the 9 congressional districts. We want to see districts that are drawn to encourage competitive elections. We want to see communities of interest kept together. We want to divide cities, towns, and counties, townships into as few districts as possible. And we want to create a transparent process that gives people confidence that this is going to be a very positive step forward. Again, I appreciate your coming and being a part of making this opportunity available to the people of Indiana to provide you with input. Thank you very much.
Tom Hayhurst from Fort Wayne.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to make a couple of comments. I spoke in Fort Wayne. I'm following up on what I said there and making a point not to repeat anything. I hear the terms bipartisan and nonpartisan being tossed around somewhat loosely. I'm an alternate member of the Indiana Citizens Redistricting Commission. We've always said that we are bipartisan, 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, and 3 independents. That's the goal. It's really tough to find 9, for instance, nonpartisan individuals. Bipartisan is the watchword, and that can be done. That can be done by Republicans and the Democrats sitting down and discussing alternatives. Secondly, I'm just going to I had some notes, and I was going to make 3 or 4 additional comments, adding on to what I said in Fort Wayne. But I'm going to say that, I'm not a skeptic. I'm looking all of you folks in the eye. At least one politician said that before, that he looked somebody in the eye and he saw his soul. I'm not saying I see your soul, but that all fell apart. We know that. But I have this gut feeling that these comments you've heard about the potential demise of our entire elected democratic system rides very much in your hands and the hands of leaders in multiple states throughout the country. So we're depending on you. You have weight on your shoulders like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and a long list of other individuals 240 years ago. So we're depending on you, and I want to remain an optimist, so give me good reason to be an optimist. Thank you.
We recognize Representative Maureen Bauer. I saw her in the back. Good to have you, Representative. At this time, I would like to open the floor for the commission members to give some closing comments here in our final minutes. Senator Cordora has asked.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. I enjoyed visiting with your community. My name is Fadi Cordora, and I have the honor of serving Senate District 30 in Indianapolis, which covers the north side of Indy, the south side of Hamilton County. I'll be brief because I know we took a lot of your precious time today, but I'll make a few points to share with you my thoughts and the overwhelming feelings of how happy I am to see you and to hear your thoughts. But also I want to convey to you the optimism that I feel, the hope that I see, and why we need to continue to advocate and work together as Republicans and as Democrats. I ran for the first time in my life for any office for the Indiana State Senate this last November. And I became the first member of a minority that I belonged to in 200 years to win office in Indiana. And I can tell you also, I ran in a gerrymandered district. I became the first Democrat in 48 years, roughly speaking, to represent that district. But I'm optimistic because I'm here as a minority. Yes, it took 200 years. Yes, it took 48 years. But as a student of history, I know for a fact that our country went through so many struggles, and we always overcome. And my esteemed colleagues, I got to work with them over the last 9 months. And I can tell you this, if you look into their eyes, as I do, I know that they are men and women of integrity, and they are people who deeply care. And I highly respect them. And I work with them every day. And I bust my behind working, not to use, the buzzword bipartisan, but deep inside, I firmly believe that we are better as a state, we are better as a nation, when instead of looking at one another as red or blue, that we look at each other as humans, and we look at each other as Hoosiers, and find common interests and policies that advance the interests of our citizens, not the politicians who are serving you. And I'm optimistic, and I put my faith and my hope in the committee, even though I don't have any influence, to be very clear. As a member of the Indiana State Senate Elections Committee, as a member of the minority, I'm not responsible or in charge of drawing the maps, which I think we need to be in charge of drawing the maps, regardless of the proportion of Democrats versus Republicans representation on this committee. But I'll tell you this: the alternative to being optimistic, which is cynicism, is that we sacrifice the future of many generations of Hoosiers to come. If our young folks grow up in this society to only get used to one flavor of politics, to think that instead of re-teaching democracy to every generation, that they've grown in a society in which it's governed only by Democrats or only by Republicans, then what we're sacrificing is that we're buying political expediency in the short term, but we're sacrificing our democracy in the long term. And I don't think that is right. I said it before for those who attended Fort Wayne and other places. I came from a third world country. And I understand third world countries, when you have one party or one system that governs. I am proud to be an American citizen. I'm overwhelmed. I'm excited. I'm proud to serve my country. But I can't tell you how critical it is to preserve the institutions of our democracy. And they are much more important than any political party. And I will... I've said it before to my colleagues, I've said it before in different committees. I will oppose, and I'm not afraid of saying this, I will oppose any Democrat or any Republican that is willing to sacrifice our democracy to win the next elections. I'm not politically naive. I will tell you this. I promise you, hypothetically, if the cost of getting an independent redistricting commission to happen in Indiana is my seat, I will resign today. That's how much I'm passionate about this issue. Now, I ran against a very honorable man that I respect, a very respected person in my district. We disagreed on policy. But your points that when you have a competitive district, my district, even though it was gerrymandered, but the demographics changed over the last 50 years, and it allowed me to win that district. But I had to bust my behind to knock on every door, to speak to every voter, to make my case, to show up to every debate, and clearly articulate what are the policy positions that I will be conveying in the General Assembly on behalf of the citizens. And my colleague and my opponent did the same exact thing. He had the honor of serving for one term, and if I'm privileged enough, I'll be there for the next 3 years and a half. So I urge you to keep the optimism, to stay strong. This is not about liberals. This is not about Republicans. This is not about libertarians. This is not about those who are unaffiliated. This is about a nation and about a state that struggle to be sure that we preserve the story, the history, the legacy of our democracy for generations to come. So thank you for allowing us to be with you. We will work together. I leave from here with the heavy feeling or the heavy burden on my own shoulders of carrying your message to the rest of my colleagues. And I promise you, I will bust my behind conveying that message to be sure that no matter what the outcome is, that your voices will be heard at the House of the People down in Indianapolis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you all so much for being here. This is our final stop for the northern part of the state, and I have appreciated, quite frankly, hearing from everyone. And as I've been going to the meetings, I've been taking notes. There's certainly been some common themes throughout what I have heard from in all four places that we have attended. And that really has been transparency, which came across loud and clear. The competitive districts came across loud and clear. An independent commission came across loud and clear. Keeping communities of interest together came across loud and clear as well. And there were some concerns that some places expressed more than others. And one place there was concern that that we did not have meetings in Lake County, which is more populous than the other county that we had held the meeting in. In this meeting that you all have expressed, representation has been a big thing, and that was also a big issue that was in Fort Wayne as well, because of how the districts are drawn and how your communities are divided up. That has been a big issue in those two areas. The other thing that was consistent here as was consistent in Lafayette, was how people were disillusioned. However, in Lafayette, what touched me were the two young people who were in high school that got up and spoke. And they talked about how they had been felt disillusioned with the process. They're not even eligible to vote yet. But they're already expressing their concern and talking about how their friends and their classmates feel. But you all are expressing that just as loud and clear as well. I hear how you feel disillusioned. And the fact that the concern, I think really throughout, but certainly brought home here, was the fact that people are concerned that our democracy is on, I think someone said thread, hanging on a thread. I can't remember who that was. Came across very, very loud and clear. And that is up to us as legislators to make sure that we keep the democracy that, quite frankly, started this country, and that we are the poster child from another town hall, poster child for democracy. And so that is, I've heard y'all loud and clear. Those are certainly things that I am concerned with as well, things that I'm going to be fighting for. But thank you all so much for being here. This is our last hearing for the session. Well, you know, one more thing that you all did also was loud and clear at all the meetings was that even though we're holding these meetings right now, you don't have maps to look at. And it's very important for you to have time to look at the proposed maps that we're going to have. And you want a long enough time to look at the information, to be able to analyze that information so that you can propose maps to us, and for those maps to be really considered and taken into consideration, and not have someone in the backgrounds, in the back, drawing the districts, and then we're picking who we're going to represent, and then we have 10 more years of us determining who will be voting for us. So thank you all very much.
Comment?
Yeah.
Senator Barrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, all of you, for being here and telling us what's important to you as the new maps will be drawn. This phase of the public hearings is the one that's out in the public. But as some of you have alluded to, there's another track, and that's what happens behind the closed doors. The importance of the change between how districts, the tools that people had to draw districts in the past are so primitive compared to the ones that we have today. Big data, the power of the computers, they can really drill down into districts to pick who's gonna be in what district. So someone mentioned the need to know who the consultants are, because there's very likely to be consultants, and to know what's in those contracts. Those are things that need to be transferred from the closed door out to the public. I know after the maps are made public, the legislature will go into session. We'll have a committee hearing. Those of us here will look at the maps. We'll take testimony at likely the State House. And then a couple of days later, or maybe the next day, there will be an opportunity for second reading amendments. And the day after that, we'll vote. Unless you all are successful in getting another round of this type of hearing. So my request to you is that you keep knocking on our doors to make sure we can't ignore what you've said today and what you want to see. Thank you.
In closing this evening, I want to thank you for making the time to be here today. I'm proud to represent this community. You were articulate and respectful, and it's very much appreciated. Could you give a round of applause for Wes here at Ivy Tech? And also appreciate a round of applause for Gordon Angelone and LSA and all the work that they've done. We look forward to continuing this process, continuing to gather public input. Thank you so much. This meeting is concluded.